Hey, it's Daniel from growingmusicstudio.com, and I've got Alyssa here with me, one of the coaches here at Grow, and we're going to do a shorter video today. A question came in from a client of mine, someone who's been through some of our trainings and has done some one-on-one work with me. She had a really good question. It's a question I know a lot of music school and music studio owners have, and I've never really publicly talked about this before. And I wanted to bring Alyssa on. Hey, Alyssa. I want to bring Alyssa on because I think she takes a different viewpoint than I do. And we're not going to get into a fight here, I don't think. But her perspective, I think she just comes from a different place. And we're getting into what do you do about studio families or clients, if you have adult students in your studio, where you have a withdrawal notice that's required that they might have even agreed to when they sign up, but they don't want to abide by that, or they don't abide by that. So let me ask the specific question that was sent in. The specific question was, currently my withdrawal policy states we need a 15-day notice to cancel the monthly auto bill policy, or we charge the next month. Clients who are withdrawing often make a fuss of this, get upset, or refuse to pay, even though they signed off on it when they enrolled. I even tell them, okay, then let's stop in 2 weeks. I won't charge you the whole month, but I still get an upset response. And so the question that this school owner said was, do I let them get away with it and always play nice guy in order to keep my good reputation and customer satisfaction? Or when is enough enough? Is it worth the money to get a bad review on Google? So that's the question. Now, I had some thoughts about this. I was going to make a video by myself, but I thought, you know what? I really want Alyssa's perspective on this because she comes from a different place than I do. And Alyssa, you said something to me before we started recording I thought was really interesting that I even maybe think would be worth elaborating on, and that is, you said that you've, in your studio, which is a fairly large school, you've gone through phases in your career, and as you got larger, you kind of took a different viewpoint on this. And maybe we can talk about those phases, but gut reaction on this question, what's your gut reaction? How would you deal with this? Keep in mind, this music school owner has around, I think, about 100 people enrolled. They over 100. They have multiple teachers, and her big concern, as I was actually talking with her a little bit more, was it's not so much for her. She's like, I feel a real sense of responsibility for the teachers that work for me. If someone suddenly quits, they're out that income, and I feel a certain degree of, I'll paraphrase for her, but protectiveness of those teachers. So that's a little bit more of the context that's there, because I know that you went through different phases in your school as you grew, to multiple six figures and that sort of thing. So I'm gonna let you talk first here in answering this question. I have some thoughts to add in, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic because I think it's multifaceted. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times our comfort or delivery of policies stems from our ability as people outside of our workplace to establish or create healthy boundaries.
Okay.
And I do think that what I would recommend for a sole proprietor who is running and teaching their own business and they don't employ others, probably take a very different approach than someone who employs others. As I have grown to be a larger studio, the policies in which we enforce in terms of cancellation clauses have been much more strict. And typically it's 30 days prior to the subsequent billing period that they would like a change. So I'm just giving this clarity so that folks know when I'm alluding to the cancellation clause, they know what I'm speaking to. And that's that if a client wants to cancel in mid-October, and the billing cycles for Musicians Playground or for the studio are on the 1st of every month, then they would need to let us know by September, which can even be a 45-day window for some of these folks. So we're not even talking 2 weeks. And I think that that's pretty standard. If you look around at any other comparative models in industries like gyms, for example, it's usually a 30-day notice if you're on a month-to-month membership. If you commit to an annual membership, it's typical that you're asked to sign a pretty extensive contract any other place that you go. So I think that this teacher has every right to enforce whatever the 30-day policy is or 2-week policy, whatever she feels is right. She has a right to enforce that. And it has to be done in a way where it's made very clear from the beginning for the clients that are looking to do business with her. So I think I see two things happening when teachers receive a lot of pushback on these kinds of things. It's often they're not clear enough in their onboarding process of what the most important policies are. Sometimes teachers will send clients a digital contract, or they'll send them, have them manually sign in person a paper that has a bunch of policies listed that are very unclear, hard to sift through. I mean, probably you and I both can agree, Daniel, and anyone listening, we've all signed a contract here or there without reading every single word, right? So often what happens then is that these people are missing the most critical pieces of choosing to engage with a provider or not. And an easy fix for this could be simply during the consultation process, making sure that they highlight, the teacher or the administrator or salesperson highlights the key rules for engagement. And so my salespeople, for example, will say, wonderful, we'd like to just let you know about a few big policies that you must know about before moving forward with us. One of those is the 30-day policy. They even go as far as explaining what would happen if they needed a mid-month change and when they should give notice. And then we have another software that auto-generates those policies and sends them out for their approval after that salesperson walks them through that. And then for annual contracts, yet another policy that they have to sign. So these people are getting these policies through a variety of ways, not just spoken to them, not just sent in a contract, but also in newsletters and other things that are set up on an automatic basis for these people to be exposed to, again, the rules for engagement. So the reason I'm taking such time to harp on this is that it's sometimes not just that the clients are unwilling to go along with these policies or that these policies are unfair in any way. Sometimes it's just that they're not made clear enough from the beginning. So that would be one suggestion. And then the final thing, and I'll just turn it back to you and hear what your thoughts are on this matter, is that we have to understand why we're standing by a policy. And we have to believe that to our core. So I would ask any sort of teacher or studio owner to step back and look at their policies and ask themselves, why do I have this policy in place? What's the true reason? What's the meaning it holds, right? And what you might find is that just because you've modeled a different studio in your area, or you found policies that were standard online for another business, you might find that actually half of these policies don't really have any meaning or application to my unique business and the way I do things. So it's really important that we as studio owners curate the policies that we put out there for the real needs we have. And if you're a business owner employing teachers and their financial stability is important to you, then absolutely you need to have an enforceability behind cancellation clauses and make that a #1 priority in communicating that policy while speaking with clients before they choose to engage with you. So last but not least, you might say, the reasons for which I, as a studio owner, enforce this very strictly is: 1, I believe it's the fairest thing to do. It's the most honorable and respectful thing to do for my team and for the client to do for the teacher. B, how am I as a business owner going to deliver a high quality service or product if I don't have a sense of understanding of how my business is going to perform a month out or a year out? And so if these people who are choosing to engage with you want the highest level service or product, I'm sure that they would want you as the business owner to have that kind of clarity so that you can continue to offer them predictable value. But you can't offer predictable value unless you have predictable revenue being generated. So it's a part of an agreement that comes from a source or place within us that feels grounded and fair and feels to our core that these are what are most necessary for us to do what we do in the best possible way. And when you come from that very genuine or authentic place, then when a customer starts pushing back, it's easy for you to very calmly and respectfully approach that conversation with them and explain that you understand where they're coming from, that you too have been in contracts before and have changed your mind and maybe wanted to move in a different direction. And that potentially it's an important thing to know that the reason for this contract is in place is to ensure X, Y, or Z that are in the benefit of that customer. And that as a part of engaging with the studio, this was made clear from the beginning for that reason.
Okay.
And out of respect for the studio and for the teacher, would they so mind to follow the rules that they agreed to and end their membership here? And then you can have maybe a host of other options that they can choose, which for Musicians Playground, some ideas for teachers listening would be, we a lot of times will extend lesson credits for up to a year. So if they come at us and say, hey, we're moving or we're doing something else or we're busy, no problem. You can choose any date you want to come back between now and this date, and that's when they expire. Or you can convert your membership to just be money that you can give to a friend or a family member as a gift. You could even use it toward a different program. So basically what we tell them is they are financially committed to that membership, but that they have X, Y, and Z options of using it within whatever has come up.
That's actually really helpful, because then what it does is changes the focus from the loss to the options that they have. It's not just, oh, it's my will against yours, even though it is to some degree. You're giving them an opportunity to not just lose the money. Because, and I have some questions for you actually, because the take that I have on this, that originally when I was just going to do this video alone, the take that I have on this comes more from a place of being a single teacher studio, but I had, nearly 100 students, but I saw them all because I was doing group lessons. And it goes right along with what you said a minute ago. It really has to do with the individual studio. Not that this particular studio owner or anyone who's watching this will automatically just go out and copy another studio. But it really comes down to, what do you want your business to be and what makes most sense, which includes taking into account the skills and who you are as a person. So for me, I didn't want the hassle or the headache of constantly running up against the will of people who'd already checked out in their mind. So my policy literally was just, someone could tell me this is our last day and I didn't bat an eye. I only had 2 policies in my studio: pay by the 5th and let me know at least 1 day in advance if you have to cancel a lesson, because if you do, I'll give unlimited makeups. Now, for years, I've kind of talked about that unlimited makeup policy, and there have even been people who, knowing that I kind of have a presence because Grow Your Music Studio is very well known, like people have criticized me for that. Like, oh wait, you're running this big company that helps music studios and you have that weak policy. But for me, I didn't see offering unlimited makeups as weak. I actually saw it as a huge strength of our business because people really appreciated it. Also, we were the highest priced studio in my area. So I saw it as, this is a benefit I'm giving to people, and I can offer it for literally no problem. I mean, it's no problem to me. It's not a hassle. Just go reschedule on the calendar. I don't care. And there were some people that they stayed in my studio, even though their high school daughters were in marching band and were having to miss tons of lessons, where they would reschedule at weird times. But those people would have quit if I didn't have that. And I wanted to work with those girls because they were good musicians. So I went a little far afield there. My point is that the advice that I would give is probably a little bit more tactical. And I'm going to talk about some of those tactics, and then I want to come back to you because I have some questions for you. But if one wanted to approach this from a tactical perspective, where you had some ways to mitigate the pain of this happening, understanding that my main advice here is, well, maybe let's just not fight against these people. Maybe let's just let people do what they want. But what could we do to make up for this, right? So one thing could be to charge a registration fee up front that's equal to a month's tuition or 2 weeks tuition. And so if they quit on you without notice, you just keep it, So instead of giving them the option, by that point, like you said, Alyssa, oh, they've probably already forgot. If it isn't being communicated on a frequent basis, they've probably forgotten. They might have also forgotten that they had a refundable registration fee as well. And so if they leave early and they, quote, break the contract, which really isn't the contract, but break the agreement, then just keep the registration fee, right? One could just charge more money so they didn't care. Like a studio could literally charge more money and build in, like, we lose about this amount of revenue each year because people end early. So we're just going to raise our tuition by that amount, and you can account for it that way. And you can go ahead and pay out those teachers for the rest of the, quote, agreement, even though maybe you didn't collect that money, but you collected it in a different way. You know what I mean? So another way that I dealt with this is that I got, okay, so this one's a little bit tougher to kind of say with a straight face, because I know this isn't the case for most studios, but I had so many leads coming into my studio that I often replaced quitters within days. There were some times that I would laugh because I would have someone quit, and that night I would literally start emailing people who had recently contacted me, um, that I said I don't have room, and there were sometimes it was within hours that I'd filled that spot. Now I realize that isn't always the case in most studios, but again, if we think outside the box and we operate from the principle that we can't control how other people act or feel, and we only own our own actions, that kind of led me in the way that I ran my studio to say, okay, well, what are all the actions I can do to mitigate this, or do I even care? You know, so that's coming from a very different place than you did, and I think school owners and studio owners hearing those two different styles might resonate with one more than the other. But that's really why I wanted to get you on this, because I knew you were coming from a very different place from me, and I wanted this video to be maximally useful. Now, this is where I have a question for you. Can you tell me about a time where this went poorly, where someone, or maybe it never has, I don't know. I didn't prep you for this question, but I'm curious, has there ever been a time where things have gotten a little dicey with a client because they didn't like the agreement? If there's something you're comfortable sharing.
Yes. What I found was born from that was those options I provided earlier for studio owners to consider. I think there always has to be fairness in anything that's established. And again, fairness comes from consideration of two people's needs, perspectives, desires. Okay. So as a studio, we sat back and said, okay, our non-negotiable need is we need to have clarity of what is projected next on a month-to-month basis, as well as a year-to-year basis. And in order to have that clarity, and in order to have this level of stability for our teachers to want to teach for us, we need this policy in place. So that was our need, our desire accounted for. Now, if we flip the table and we think about, okay, now let's sit inside of the seat of the client who is looking to cancel right away because of some normal thing that can come up in life, right? We've all been there. We've all had a sudden change of interest, or a financial crisis, or something that required us to change our living strategy. And we maybe, or just, we just didn't want to do business with the same company anymore. There's nothing worse than feeling like you are trapped in a contract, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, we have to understand, it's one thing to be trapped for a year in a contract. It's another thing to be trapped for a month, for 30 days. So I find that the fairness then comes into, okay, well, what's the interest of these people? The interest is that they feel they have choice. So how can we satisfy that sense of having choice, but also satisfy our need for that policy to be adhered to? And that's where those ideas were generated, which is, here are three options. So now my salespeople who do exit interviews gather the objections, or gather the issues, or why people are quitting. And then they'll suggest, okay, listen, no problem. Hey, look, we do have that 30-day policy. So let's figure out what is the best option of these three for you making the most value and use of your remaining time with us. And then that kind of pivots the conversation to them choosing, being in a place of empowerment and a place of fairness in the discussion. One specific example you asked me about, like when this has gone awry or if we've gotten any pushback. So once we did that, far less, by the way, but we do have every once in a while a bad egg, and we do have a need to assert our position. I will talk very quickly about one specific story. We have very, very clear contracts in place. We had them drafted by an attorney. They were modeled off of like a business that's the size of, a national business. So there's really no room for misunderstanding anything in our contract. They're airtight policies. And we get electronic signatures on them before any client signs up for an annual membership with us. So a particular family we served did not submit written cancellation at all. They just had told their teacher, and there was a disconnect of them telling their teacher, substantiating as cancellation notice. And that person was billed for subsequent 8 months, and they didn't attend classes. So I get a
Wow.
call, I get an angry call from this mom, and my staff had escalated it to me, and we come to find out they had been getting billed for the classes and their son was not attending, and she
And
had
they
thought,
didn't notice for 8 months?
and they didn't notice for 8 months.
Wow, okay. That says something right there too. Continue, please.
Yeah, so right away, this is probably a busy family. She's probably, or he, mom and dad are probably a little more aloof in the kinds of things that are happening in their child's life, and definitely aloof with checking financial statements. So here we are as a company, though, and one thing I will say in regards to a comment you made earlier, I think it's very dangerous to be a company that refunds at all. I think we all need to stand a very solid ground and never refund really under any circumstance unless it was truly at the fault of the business for billing and notice was given accordingly. But what we can't be in the business of is making refunds down the road that we're not expecting, because that can get us into a financial pickle. It can be really hard for us as a business to really understand and project how we're doing financially if we're sitting on a bunch of refunds that need to be issued. So this was a situation where, well, what's fair here? This mom didn't submit cancellation formally. We had no idea. The administrative team, the support team, the sales team had no idea that they had stopped taking.
Hmm.
And she wants a refund. She wants a refund. And not only a refund for the months that she was billed that her child didn't attend, but the month before that too, before she gave notice, right? So it was a sticky situation. This one got escalated. This one was really, she got quite angry. And you know what? We presented her an airtight policy, and I kept a very calm tone with her, and she was not so calm with me, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, I submitted a policy where her signature is on there and the date and digital form, right? And I said, I'm
Right.
sorry. So here are your options now. Your options are for your son to use all of his lessons through 2023. Like, we'll extend it to 2 years if you want. Your son can take virtual lessons if you're moving in the interim. Your son can transfer these as a gift to friends and family members. Your son can, and we worked with her to come up with anything that we could. At the end of the day, she threatened to report us to the BBB, to review us, she got really nasty with me. And I just kept my calm and kept reasserting, here's the attachment, please review it. Here's the attachment, please review it. She even threatened to have an attorney. And I said, please feel free, I'll connect you with my attorney. Like, so it's all about knowing, what's
Hmm.
there. And I still feel like a lot of teachers listening to this might say, wow, Alyssa's really mean, or or that's really extreme, and I would never do that, and poo-poo to her for not being more considerate of that family. But when you're running a business, when you're running a larger business, when you have teachers who work for you, you have to, the lines have to be black and white. There's no personal feelings that can go into these things when you are running a larger operation. And that's just the truth. And so it's a hard spot that it puts us in. Again, if the teacher is listening that is running a sole proprietorship or is teaching for themselves, this is different. You're the person, you're the rules. You can change to how, you can change the way you do things to a certain extent if you like. But if you're looking to grow, if you're looking to scale, you can't really be doing that as much. And if you are growing, or if you are grown up, or if you are scaled, then you really can't do that kind of thing. So yeah.
So what you're saying here, actually, I said we were coming from two different places, but in reality, at the root of why I did what I did and why you're doing what you do, at the root is the same understanding. And that is, you can't expect to have leverage if you don't have leverage. And ultimately, I don't know if that woman ever left a bad review. See? She ultimately knew she was wrong. And so often I see these long threads in some of the Facebook forums where someone says, I can't believe this person did this to me. And they have this long drawn out explanation for, what this family did. And then you have 150 comments below it of just basically people complaining, and having a salty attitude towards how poorly all these people treat us as But the truth of the matter is, if you don't have the structures in place like you do, you can't complain when people act in accordance to what you presented to them.
Yeah.
If you don't have something in place like you do, you can't complain when people do that. If you have them sign a Google form that says, yes, I will give you 30 days notice, and it was just a little checkbox and the thing right above it, good luck.
Yeah.
If you want to get serious, then you do something like what you did.
Yes. Right.
And so I guess the point I'm really making is that in knowing that I didn't really have the desire to go to the lengths that you did, because I didn't have the desire to build as big a business as you have. For me, it was just then, well, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not going to pretend. So I'm going to go the opposite direction. And I'm going to just make everything loose and freewheeling and casual. And I'm going to build a friendly environment in which, not saying you haven't, by the way, there's no subtext there, but I'm going to build more of like a relational thing so that these people don't want to do that. And part of that had to do with how I interacted with them. Part of it had to do also with how demanding I was in certain respects. So people did respect me because they saw in little things that they couldn't walk on me. And I was fearless in doing that. I just answered a question the other day from someone, another client via email, and they had said, yeah, I sent out this thing that you told me to send out and no one replied. And I said, well, how many times did you resend it? Not once. So if I sent something out to my studio and I needed a response and they didn't respond, they started getting daily emails from me until they responded. I give them 3 days, and if I didn't hear back from them, they would get daily emails from me until they responded. And I've had people, I've literally heard people gasp when I've said that before in some of the like live coaching sessions I've done. Oh, won't they get mad? Listen, I don't live my life worrying about if people get mad or if they're going to leave a bad review. But I also think simultaneously, part of the reason you didn't get the bad review or why I didn't is that it's funny, that fear actually attracts it.
Yes.
Whereas if you're coming, and I can't prove this is like more like EQ, not IQ. It's more that emotional side of business that too often gets ignored in favor of studio challenges and 30-day challenges and tactical stuff. But that emotional side of the more fearless I got, the more casual I was around people, and I saw that people just didn't test my fences like they did constantly early on in my studio. But
Yeah.
I think coming out of this, and the last thing I'll say is just really that if you want leverage, you have to buy that leverage, and you have to remind people, and it's only as good as your ability to enforce it, even if you do have an attorney that could go to bat for you. Because I bet many people that I've seen, complain in the various studio owner groups, about a client, abusing them or whatever. They probably couldn't have had that very hard conversation that you had to have with that particular person. They probably would have folded. Truth is, I might have folded. I might have looked at that situation and been like, oh, well, I can see like we accidentally charged them for, when we shouldn't have, it's going back. I don't care. But again, that's just my personality coming from a different place, not being in the position that you're in. So it's easy to sit in the sidelines and judge. And I would just say, if anyone's judging you, Alyssa, then, well, I can't say that on this recording.
Sometimes, as you're crawling into this sense of who you are, what you want your business to be, it can be uncomfortable. And I do want to address the very real personal aspect to this.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that what's important is that as a business, again, you're constantly considering how can it be done better in the future. Because don't get me wrong, I don't want anyone listening to this to take away that I'm not considering the other person in the equation
Sure.
at all. Because I truly am. And in that situation, I asked myself after that whole thing concluded, and after, the email chains back and forth stopped, I asked myself, why did this happen in the first place? And what could we as a business do to take better care of our customers? What am I learning from this situation? Even though I had to enforce that, and even though it felt challenging to enforce that, and even though on a personal level, I could feel and I could empathize with that family,
100%.
I still had to stand by that policy because I knew that that person signed the policy, they were made aware, and that execution of cancellation was not done in the way that it was asked for them to do it for a very specific reason. So with this being said, I came up with, okay, clearly we can have our admins spending more time monitoring who's utilizing their credits, who's not, and give a courtesy reach out to people who are not engaging with their membership the way that they would usually engage if they were active members. We could look at how can we make the policies even more clear and through a more extended process, right? So more solutions come from these uncomfortable situations, but there's a very big difference of making things better and improving things versus folding and going against your policies because you're personally uncomfortable. So I think each studio owner has to make the decision in a way that feels best for them. And don't be afraid to ask the question, what am I afraid of? Because if we really think about the bad review, or, I'm afraid of a bad review. Well, what's behind that fear? Because there's something behind that, right? It's not just a bad review, right? Or in the case of losing, I'm afraid of losing a customer. Why are you afraid of losing a customer, right? What's behind that fear? And then you start to uncover, wow, I have, a need for people to like me. And that need for people to like me makes me unable to stand up as a leader in my business. And that is the thing that then we begin working on, right? Because it's not just setting up a contract or a policy, like you were saying earlier. It's about being able to personally stand by that too, and being in alignment with yourself to a point where the person receiving that respectful boundary feels like they get it too, right? That they're still being considered, but that they understand. So I think there's an art to it. And my point is, a lot of times these are both professional and personal. And to kind of recap what I think the both of us have exchanged today so far, it would be, one, make sure that you have the actual leverage. So get clear on what's useful for your studio, truly. What's useful? What policies really need to be in place? Two, to what level do those policies need to be formalized based on your needs?
Yeah.
Three, what are your deepest fears around, pushback that you get from clients, and where do those come from? What's the source of those? And address the personal stuff as well. And I think by doing all of that, you'll be in a much healthier place. Studio owners will be in a much healthier place to enforce their policies.
100%. I think this is a good place to end on those 3 points. And maybe just a little thought here at the end, and that is, I think we're coming from a very different place than most of the advice that is given. The great Derek Sivers has a really interesting quote. If more information is all we needed, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs.
I love that one.
And so often what I see studio owners doing are looking for the right information to get more students, solve this problem. How do I do this? How do I do that? And there's nothing wrong with how-to information. There isn't. What's interesting is that the landscape in which we as an industry are operating in is very different than it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I only knew of one blog that was writing about marketing, and that was mine. There were some other people out there that were doing, who had programs, but I kind of came on the scene just writing about marketing. I really didn't have a program to sell. And what's interesting is over the last 5 years, and with kind of the rise of Web 3.0 and everyone wanting to be a coach now, there is more information than ever. There are more programs than ever out there with the right information about Facebook ads or Google ads or or the best curriculum for this, the best program for that, et cetera, et cetera. There's no shortage of information. What there is a shortage of for each individual person, and I don't, this could be controversial, but it's really that internal piece. And I'm not going to point to anyone else. I'm going to point to myself. Very clearly remember the first few years that I was working, teaching music, and having a hard conversation with parents, and literally not being able to sleep at night because of those conversations. I was so upset by them or disturbed by them or afraid because of things that people had said. My throat would tighten up. My stomach would I get that acid feeling in my stomach when I had to have a conversation about my makeup policy that this mom didn't like. Cave. No amount of reading that anyone can do on the right makeup policy or the right thing to say or the right email to send would stop that from happening. What I needed was an emotional change. What I needed was to be developed as a leader and as a human. That's what's missing. And that's why Alyssa and I have a little secret project that's going on right now, that we're going to be talking about more and more over the coming months leading into next year, where we're focusing on building people as leaders, not in information they need for the right marketing tactic or the best policy for the studio. Really coming from that deeper place of how do you become the kind of person that can run a successful studio, no matter what size you want to be, whether you want to be 50 or 500. And I think we have a lot more to share over the coming months, videos we're going to release that we've already been planning on releasing. And I'm excited to keep having these conversations with you, Alyssa.
Oh, you too, Daniel. Thanks so much.
All right.